Checkpoints is presented by pharmaceutical company GM Pharma.
This week, the World Bank in Tbilisi presented a new report, Middle Trade and Transport Corridor Policies and Investments to Triple Freight Volumes and Halve Travel Time by 2030. The report provides a comprehensive assessment of the expected demand for the Middle Corridor, a multimodal rail and maritime corridor linking Chinese and European markets via Central Asia and the Caucasus. The study also offers a detailed diagnostic of infrastructure and logistics services capacity and constraints in the three core countries of the Middle Corridor, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, and Georgia. One of the key messages of the report is that this is an opportune moment to realize the catalyzing potential of the Middle Corridor. New data and economic modeling in the report support the viability of the Middle Corridor. A combination of investments and efficiency measures can reduce travel times along the corridor by half and triple trade flows by 2030, according to World Bank, although there is significant focus on the corridor's role as a land bridge between China and Europe. It is of critical importance as a regional corridor for countries through which trade will flow. The World Bank says an increased trade between Azerbaijan, Georgia, Kazakhstan, and Europe are the key drivers of demand. Modeling projects a 37% increase in trade between Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Kazakhstan, and a 28% increase between these countries and the EU by 2030. According to the World Bank assessment, a fully functioning corridor would help to shield China-Europe trade and supply chains from shocks. The World Bank believes that the near-term efficiency gains and medium-term investments will strengthen the functioning of the Middle Corridor and harness its potential to invigorate regional trade. This requires steps to improve coordination, logistics, and digitalization, while critical investments are needed to upgrade railways, intermodal facilities, and ports in Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Kazakhstan. There is a huge potential for economic development if the Middle Corridor is fully developed, said Rolanda Price, the World Bank Regional Director for the South Caucasus, on Tuesday. According to the World Bank Regional Director, Georgia is one of the key countries in the Middle Corridor.
Today we're launching a World Bank study called Unlocking the Potential of the Middle Corridor. And there are a number of findings, but I think the key finding is that there's an opportunity to triple trade volumes and to half travel time as compared with what the times were in 2021 and the trade volumes of 2021, which means that there is a huge potential for economic development if the Middle Corridor is fully developed. But this is going to take some time and it's going to take some investments. And most importantly, it's going to take collaboration between the various stakeholders, both public and private, in order to make it happen.
We knew that the report was coming since Tbilisi hosted a Silk Road Forum. That's when the Checkpoint sat down with Charles Cormier, World Bank's Infrastructure Regional Director for Europe and Central Asia, for an interview on the potential of the Middle Corridor. The World Bank's Infrastructure Regional Director then told the Checkpoints that the World Bank had already finalized a report that would see the daylight in coming weeks.
The Middle Corridor, though, saw an increase in trade of about 33% compared to last year in 2023. And we are about to publish a study that will soon come out where we're looking at also trade flow projections over the next decade. And we do think that the Middle Corridor is viable. Some people think about it as a redundancy, so as an alternate route, but for some markets, for containerized freight, if you improve the efficiencies around border crossing points, around logistics, improving the performance of the rail sector, you could attract a lot of that volume. And for open freight, already there's not too much alternatives. For the countries that are landlocked, the Middle Corridor is already viable. But we'll have some interesting numbers you'll see in the next few weeks on the trade projections and why we think the Middle Corridor is still viable, even if when peace breaks out eventually and we see a normalization, we do think Middle Corridor will be viable.
Can't wait to see that study. The report is out, and this time Shomink Mendirata, the World Bank's practice manager for transport in Europe and Central Asia, took our questions. Mr. Sherman, thank you for taking our questions, and thank you for being on the show. First of all, what were some of the main messages of the conference today?
Elena, thank you very much for having me on the show. Our conference today was on the Middle Corridor and the World Bank Middle Corridor report. And I think the messages that were discussed were the messages of the report. This is the moment of the Middle Corridor, and if the Middle Corridor rises up to it, it can become an important element of the east-west intercontinental traffic, not just for what it is, which is a very important regional corridor, which serves the countries of Kazakhstan and Georgia and Azerbaijan, but also as a land bridge potentially between China and the EU. Now, for the Middle Corridor to get its potential, the report suggested and the conference confirmed that there are kind of 5 big ideas.
Exactly. Let us follow each one, if that's okay. Yes, so that our viewers also get the essence of what the report was about. So the first one is reimagine the Middle Corridor as an economic corridor.
Yeah, so this is a long-term suggestion, but a very critical suggestion. When we say reimagine the corridor as an economic corridor, what we mean is, while it's important to make sure that it's efficient, that the travel times go down, that costs go down, think also about the economic development impacts that this increased accessibility can bring. So, think about how you can generate more jobs, more business along the corridor that benefits from the increased accessibility. And perhaps I'll give you 1 or 2 examples.
Exactly.
One example could be cargo distribution centers. As you have more container traffic, perhaps you can induce and incentivize businesses to set up distribution centers or logistics centers along the corridor. Another example is when the increased accessibility makes a location better for production, then perhaps complementary policies on creating the right facilities for an industrial zone can have an impact. So that's really what we mean. And in the best cases, the best corridors have had that impact. Not only, and our report gives some examples of it, not only creating efficient transport, but engendering regional development along the way.
Yes, offer corridor length logistics solutions.
At the moment, for most traffic, the Middle Corridor still remains almost like a series of pipes. You have a pipe on the Kazakhstan rail side, and then the port side, and then you have Baku port, and then more rail. And every time you cross a border, it's almost like a different, it's a connection of 2 pipes. And an end-to-end solution is when the whole thing feels like 1 pipe. Yes? What does that mean? That you don't have to put information over and over again to cross borders. It means that when you want the price of traveling on the Middle Corridor for a piece of cargo, you can get a price for the whole trip. You don't have to piece together prices from different agencies. So it's both a matter of receiving information before you make your decision. It's a matter of how your cargo is treated, and it's a matter of receiving information during the trip. So, for most people now, it's not only important to have, travel costs, travel time, and reliability, but it's important to know where your cargo is, to have visibility. And having an end-to-end solution means that wherever it is, you are able to get a sense of where the cargo is.
Yes, you mentioned the price, but probably the next step also adds to this length logistics solutions, that's reform and simplify procedures.
Every time you cross a border, every country has their own interests, has a need to make sure their borders are safe. So there are a lot of procedures. The problem is that in the Middle Corridor, any piece of cargo crosses multiple borders. And unless those borders are not aligned in what information they're asking and how they're treating cargo in terms of risk management, you run the risk of very long delays at these borders. In addition to the borders, you have multimodal shifts. You go from rail to port and from port to rail again. And every time you have a connection like this, you run the risk of delays. So, both for information and for operational reasons. And the idea is to find ways to reduce and synchronize and align those.
The next step is leverage the potential of digital data flows.
Digital data flows, I think the conference today confirmed, perhaps are, for a modern cargo system, the most important thing you can do. And, there are so many elements to it. Think of the Expedia. When you want to take a trip, you want to be able to order, to get a price and availability as soon as you put in your origin destination. So that is one part of digitization, which currently is still difficult in the middle corridor. The second part of digitization, think of an Apple AirTag. You put an AirTag in your bag so you can see where it is. You have the visibility. And you see many airlines do that to your bags now because you want that visibility. It gives you comfort. That's another element of digitization, this track and trace. A third one is, for example, just the process you use when you check in your suitcase. You get it at the other end. You have a barcode, and that barcode is used by the airlines, the airports, for all their processes. The same way as you have a piece of cargo that's crossing countries, that's crossing borders, that's crossing modes, crossing operators, it needs a simple and simplified set of electronic documents so that you don't have to repeat all those documents. And once you have all that, you can actually make sure that you can do operations more efficiently. So digitization has all these different dimensions, and that's what we're talking about.
And the last but not the least, continue to improve infrastructure and equipment following robust prioritization plan.
As the corridor already has some important choke points where the investments are needed. Turkey, for instance, requires several important investments. Across the Caucasus, rolling stock is an issue. There are important choke points actually, there are some important choke points almost across the corridor. And as traffic increases, there will be more needs. So, perhaps the operational issues can be solved even a little more quickly. But in the long run, for this corridor to achieve its potential, there is a need for a lot of investments. And anytime there's a need for a lot of investments, there's a need to do it carefully. So you save your scarce resources and do the right ones at the right time.
So do you see this potential for this very tough and complex project to be bankable at some point?
We wouldn't be here if it's not bankable, would we? So, for the World Bank, of course, we're a development institution. So when we think of what's bankable, it's not only the economic benefits, but, the benefits it brings from a climate perspective, from a resilience perspective, from a perspective of a broader holistic development. And certainly, we see this as an important and very bankable project, a very bankable program for the countries of Central Asia, the Caucasus, and for connecting China to the EU. And I think in addition to that, there will be separate investment projects that are also bankable from a traditional financial perspective. And I think it's this combination of layered bankability that makes this an important and interesting project.
Will it be easy to convince investors, to convince the countries to invest in the potential of the middle corridor? Because one of the findings even of this report says that in the middle run, so to say, the corridor will still be more of a regional value rather than a global value.
I was very encouraged actually with the reception that the report has received. In part, I think what the reception is telling us is that the countries are already making those investments. Because I think this regional traffic, it's not a minus, it's not a bug, it's a feature. What it provides is economic viability, you know, and economic viability with regional traffic gives you the luxury of making those improvements, being able to afford the improvements that then allow you to get land bridge traffic between China and EU. So certainly we are supporting Turkey to make some big investments. We are talking to all the other countries in the corridor that are interested in important assessments, and so are some of our other development partners. So I see a very strong interest across the board from all the countries in making this corridor all it can be.
Mm-hmm. Is it easy to see what could be the so to say the budget of the middle corridor at this point? Because now we see some of the figures. At the very beginning there were not even figures, but now we already see some figures.
Well, you know, I think the immediate priority is digitization and border controls and simplification, and thinking of seamless, coordinated, packaging of products. And these are not expensive. These we are talking about millions and maybe hundreds of millions of dollars. Then we are talking about changes in modernization of the port rail interfaces, modernization of the ports, and perhaps some capacity improvements at the ports. Again, we are talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think in the immediate term, for less than $1 billion, which sounds like a lot, but distributed over many countries over 5 or 6 years, you can get very significant improvements. And then as these improvements start creating more volumes and more success, there will be a need for more infrastructure investment, of course. And you may know that EBRD came out with a report suggesting that there is scope for up to $18 billion of investment in the broader middle corridor. And ultimately, of course, that kind of investment may well be needed if the corridor becomes as successful as it can be.
Mm-hmm. In Georgia, during the Silk Road Forum, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Kazakhstan created a joint venture to develop this middle corridors multimodal service. Did you hear during the conference people referring to that venture, and do you think this could be supposed to be like one step towards what we were talking about, the reforming, simplifying procedures, providing one price, and seemingly having this one pipeline rather than parts of a one pipeline?
Indeed, I do think that joint venture is an important part of the solution. You know, we did hear during the conference about blockchain trains that have been moving, almost seamlessly from China all the way to Poti Port. That's already a sign of much improved coordination. We have also heard about a digital joint venture created with PSA of Singapore, to help digitize the corridor that has started with Kazakhstan, is now working in Azerbaijan, and is starting work in Georgia. So I think there is important work going on, both on the operational side in terms of seamlessness and on the digital side. So I think the work is ongoing, yes.
Yes, so the report makes emphasis on robust prioritization of projects. At this point, where do you see the most bottlenecks? Is it railway? Is it roads? Is it
I'll talk on the extended corridor. I think on the extended corridor, perhaps Turkey rail is one of the most important bottlenecks, crossing the Bosphorus and all of Turkey. These are investments that we are getting involved in, and I'm happy to tell you that they're getting solved. In the Caucasus, I would say that the most urgent investment is in rolling stock. And that's true in Georgia, but it's also true in Azerbaijan. That at the moment it is too often the paucity of rolling stock which is creating delays. And then I think the next big bottleneck is the modernization of the ports. Both in Baku and Aktau, I think there would be benefits, not immediately in increasing capacity, but at least modernizing procedures, modernizing equipment, and then adding capacity. There are some bottlenecks on the railroads, important bottlenecks, but those perhaps affect bulk traffic, the traditional traffic, a little more because they cause speed restrictions. So I think important to invest in the rail systems and to make sure that the tracks are up to date, but the absolute critical infrastructure needs are Turkey, rolling stock in the Caucasus, and the ports.
And also, since you mentioned the ports, does Georgia need the deep sea port? You know, there are talks about building Anaklia and also helping Poti. Is it a critical infrastructure for the middle corridor to function or not?
Well, at the moment, most of the middle corridor traffic goes through Poti and Batumi. And from what we have understood, the latest figures suggest that Poti is already working at capacity. Growth at Poti has been much faster than I think almost anyone could have predicted. And if Poti does not expand, then I think you will start seeing delays accumulating in the middle corridor, maybe even in a year. So there is a need for more port capacity, at least until the Turkish rail solution comes on board. How to do that, we haven't been very involved so far, so we would be happy to support the government to think through the options.
Also, what are some of the specific recommendations that the World Bank might have for these countries along the middle corridor? What could be the quick wins so that the process goes on smoothly?
I think the quickest wins have to do with simplification of documentation and with digitization. Okay, these are not easy wins, but these are the quickest wins. Okay, I think I was encouraged to hear how much work is going on there, and I think we are supporting some of that work. We are helping the different stakeholders coordinate on technology solutions, but digitization and digitization of the customs process and simplification of the customs process are perhaps the most rapid things they can do. The next would be operational changes, especially at the ports, both on the port rail interface and the Caspian is a very particular environment, and it requires very particular kinds of operational protocols. And we are doing some work where we hope to provide some suggestions on how to make the Caspian ports operate at perhaps a higher throughput. Yes.
And also the trade model developed by the World Bank foresees an overall increase in trade between China and the EU by about 30% by 2030, and also halving the transport time. Please elaborate a little bit on that.
I think what we suggest is if you can make the improvements that we suggest, then travel times can be consistently brought down to less than 20 days. And that would significantly increase traffic and significantly increase this China-EU traffic, which would be all containers. That's a new kind of traffic. It's an exciting traffic, it's profitable traffic, and to be able to grow that traffic would be, I think, very much in the interest of the Middle Corridor. Now, it will always be that most of that China-EU traffic will travel, for example, by ocean or by other means. So it will always be a small part of that traffic that will travel on the Middle Corridor. But it could be a very exciting development for the Middle Corridor.
My last question, and thank you for your time. What do you want at this point to be the main message of the report towards those countries that are involved in Middle Corridor and those investors that might be interested in investing? And
I think the Middle Corridor has its moment. This is its moment, and the word to all the stakeholders is let's take advantage of this moment and make this corridor an important, viable part of the intercontinental traffic.
How can Georgia specifically contribute to that? Because here in Georgia there are also challenges, right? Because we see the different indexes show it is quite expensive in Georgia. So what could Georgia do specifically to contribute to that?
I would say three things. I think first is it's critical to solve the rolling stock problem. And that will mean it's not a question only of financing, but it's a question of thinking through institutions, of the relationship between Georgia Rail and government, so that critical investments like locomotives can be made by Georgia Railways, that they are not weighed down by legacy debt to be able to do that. The second is make sure that in the short run, port capacity does not become a constraint. It's been fantastic to see the growth in Pothi, but 1 year from now, Pothi can become the bottleneck if there is no expansion. So let's solve that. And the third is institutions. I've talked about rail institutions, but thinking also about port sector institutions, because ultimately the government of Georgia has to find ways of expressing their interests in infrastructure and has to do it in ways that still bring the animal spirits of the private sector in to make the investments. And I think these are important discussions that are happening in Georgia at the moment and can be a very big part of the Middle Corridor.
Thank you so much. Thank you for a very interesting interview.
Thank you very much.
The Checkpoints is presented by pharmaceutical company GM Pharma.